my people, open up your door. Peace, love and joy. Let them soar, let them soar. Ramadan, Ramadan.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, to another live episode of Gates of Goodness, where every night during this blessed month of Ramadan, we'll be discovering new ways to enjoy upon goodness and increase in nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm your host, Yusuf Kroma, and tonight we'll be discussing Ramadan and struggling. We'll be discussing particularly the Battle of Badr and how the Muslims overcame the Meccans during the month of Ramadan while fasting through the success of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll be discussing these things in comparison to how we as Muslims can use this to invigorate us, to sort of promote sort of strength during the month of Ramadan, to equip us with the spiritual power to succeed and overcome, inshallah ta'ala. So before going too deeply into the topic, we'd like to introduce our noble guest, Dr. Emaad.muhanna. He's a professor of political science and strategic studies at Mr. University. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for having me.
Alhamdulillah, the pleasure is always ours. Secondly, we'd like to introduce Brother Amr Abdul Ad. Assalamu alaikum wa
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And last but certainly not least, we have a veteran of the show, Brother Idris Surat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah. So let's get right into the topic, shall we? So let's start with the setting of the Battle of Badr. What were the circumstances leading up to the Battle of Badr, and why was it so crucial for the Muslims to succeed?
I think the Battle of Badr set the precedent for all types of wars that the Muslims might go into, highlighting the main reasons that Islam and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam basically instructed people to go into war for, whether to defend their land, or their dignity, and also to put the flag of Islam upright. I think Badr, in the circumstances, the Arabs were, or during the Muslims during that time, were very much discriminated against, and it needed a defining moment in the history of Islam. And what I like about Ramadan is a lot of defining moments in Ramadan, and wars that took place in Ramadan, starting from Badr, ending in 1973 war against the Arab-Israeli war. Badr basically, as I said, highlights basically that the Muslims follow the instructions of Prophet Muhammad, that do not fight people that are elderly or women or kids or lunatic, among others, but only fight for your rights. And Muslims in Badr fought for the rights to believe in God, and basically reject all the ideologies of non-Muslims, particularly in Quraysh. And I think that was a major threat to the Arabs during that time, particularly in Mecca, and that was a defining moment. The main defining moment here, that in the Arab Peninsula we start seeing a major superpowers that took place. We knew about a number of tribes that basically held the power in the Arab Peninsula, but suddenly after Badr battle, the Muslims start to gain confidence in themselves, and the Arabs started to take into account that there is another major power. It changed also how the Muslims were treated in Medina during that time, and how they were received in Mecca during the Mecca opening. That was always the defining moment that the Muslims always looked up to in a number of wars, and along the last 1400 years, Ramadan and Badr are always renewing the belief, or restoring the confidence in themselves, in their religion and in God, and restoring that Islam is the religion of peace and not the religion of war.
Sure. So we know that what caused the Muslims to be successful in the Battle of Badr, and
they were forced,
which was unlike any other war.
Absolutely, they were forced to defend themselves and basically gain some of their rights, and it became the precedent or the rule thereafter that the Muslims never go into wars. And you find that Muslim nations are not among the colonizing nations; they never go into attacking other nations. They only go to spread Islam peacefully, and only go into war when they are discriminated against or marginalized, or you know, to gain or regain the power over the land or their territories. And all the wars that we've seen throughout the 1400 years always prove that, as I said, Islam is a piece of religion.
Yeah, so I want to tap into the spiritual component, because we know it was a war of against all odds, where the Muslims were a number of 300. Some of the ulama say, others say have different numbers, but the most narrated one is 300, and the Meccans were 1,000. So they had the differences of a higher battlefield, and they had all the
here it comes from the faith itself, how strong of your faith. And you will see that in the ayat of the Quran, that one person equal 10. And then you become weaker, so, you know, 1 equal to 2. And unfortunately, with the weakening of Muslims nation at this point, and forgetting a lot about the Islamic instructions, we became too weak. And your question is really interesting, because it highlights basically that, as Omar said, that God has given us dignity with Islam. Once we turn our back into it, we become basically without dignity, and that's basically what's happening. We need to go back into Islam, and that's what I like about the wars that took place in Ramadan. They always kind of tie up the spiritual worshipping, which fasting is part of it, along with our own belief in God and in His victory. In the end, we gain victory. But there's also examples where we lost wars because we didn't have that faith. So war is always to defend our rights, but we always have to have the faith. Otherwise, we're not going to win the wars, and that's basically what's happening across the world. You can see now, and as Prophet said, that the nations will come upon you to eat you as people eat around a plate. And the question basically from Sahaba is, why are we basically little in numbers? He said, no. But it's basically what we're talking about here is 1.5 billion Muslims, but what power do we have? And the physical power that we don't have in terms of military and political power, or even economic power, simply because we don't have the proper principles of faith that we deserve to be a powerful nation. Okay. So we need to go to the basics of Islam and the right belief that Prophet Muhammad came with.
Okay, I want to get Brother Amr involved in the conversation, inshallah, regarding spirituality, you know, that's possessed in the month of Ramadan, and how does that tie into success, general success for the Muslims? If you can hone that type of spirituality, we know there was mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even sent His angels down into the battle. So, you know, let's talk about that a bit. And I'm going to come to Brother Idris next, inshallah, with the same question.
Yeah, first of all, during Ramadan, our status of faith goes very high. So I think it's very appropriate for Muslims to have, like, if you're going into war, you're not depending on your physical power, so it depends on your faith, as the professor said. So when you have this high level of faith and you're going into war having trust in Allah, so Allah will always be at your side and will always grant you victory. So it doesn't depend on because in most of the battles Muslims had in Ramadan, and actually not in Ramadan, but we were outnumbered. But Allah granted us victory because we were fighting for the cause of defending Islam, spreading the word of Allah, and we're not fighting for political gains or gaining land or anything else. We're fighting just for Allah. That simple. We're just fighting for Allah. So Allah will always be at our side. But what's happening now, in the Battle of Badr, we were outnumbered 3 times or more, and outnumbered by the weapons and everything in the warfare. Anyone who is an expert in warfare, this battle was never going to be in our favor if we are just fighting by the measures of humans. So what happened is we were not going to this war because we were equal number to them, we were as powerful as them, but we were going to this war because we were going to, because of Allah's sake, to defend our nation, to defend our existence, to defend Allah's message sent to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah granted us victory, and He supplied even our army with angels, as you said. Okay. So it doesn't depend on how much power you have. It depends on how much faith you have in your heart.
Okay. What do you do?
Yeah, for me, I think when I think about Ramadan, I think about the peculiarities between, like, the connection between fasting and these victories and things that happen. And I think it's sort of amazing because if you look at what fasting does for you, it's sort of a great regiment for this type of activities that you know, defending yourself and doing what you have to do for the sake of Allah. Especially it teaches you patience. It teaches you to control your nafs, which are all, some of, coming from military background myself, are all some of the most important things that you need when you're in these situations. You have to be able to control your emotions, your everything that dealing around with what you want to do, you need to be able to control it. And fasting teaches you this. And on top of that, fasting is for Allah. So fasting increases your ikhlas. Where you need ikhlas? Where? On the battlefield. If you don't have ikhlas on the battlefield, you may be a victor, maybe, but it won't be long lasted, and the sweetness from it won't come from it. But majority of the time when you don't have ikhlas, you lose, usually. Okay, and so I think this connection between Sawm and the battles in Ramadan that happen, we can make an entire show about just that aspect itself. It's an amazing thing when you look at the aspects and how they go hand in hand, and especially having come from a military background and having to learn certain disciplines, I can see how they fit like a glove, one in one. Okay. So I see the connection and how the barakah from Allah would come into this.
Okay. So Dr. Imaad, what was the impact that the Battle of Badr had on both the Meccans and the Muslims at the time?
Well, to explain it clearly, we could divide it into a political, economic, socio-cultural, and even international relations kind of thing. On the political sphere, I think the Arabs started to realize that a new power that is being born, and definitely will have to be respected because they will have a say in all matters to come. From that we could see that Uhud, the next battle, was a lot easier in terms of how they got into it. But Badr was the defining moment between being in a situation where Islam just came out, and people have no respect whatsoever for the group of people. You are, you are outnumbered, as Mr. Amr said, by far. So on the political level, a new superpower was born during that time. Number two, on the spiritual and religious front, I think it gave faith to Muslims that yes, Prophet Muhammad is on the right side. His religion became stronger in the hearts of Muslims themselves, and also started to attract a lot of people, particularly from the previously disadvantaged groups and slaves, etc. So they started to realize that the power that Quraysh was basically claiming is just fake, and with faith basically you can be a lot stronger, as the brother said. So the fact here is it's a birth of a new era that the Arabs basically will have to go through, and we could see from that time Prophet Muhammad and his followers really had to have a say in all areas. On the economic side, whatever they gained from Badr basically started to impact economically on them, because part of the war is always economic in terms of spending money and in terms of the gain. The Arabs basically started to realize that the Muslims are able to make trade with other nations, as they were basically in a Sham area and go to Syria, Palestine and Jordan. So it started to expand economically. The Prophet Muhammad and his group started to have economic base in Medina and expand on that, taking into account that the war of Badr is basically a defining moment, and it will be followed by a number of wars, because the Arabs will not keep quiet. The impact on the, let's call it, international sphere, I think the non-Arabs started to realize that, particularly the Jews and the Christians who knew that there is a prophet coming, started to hear about him. So Badr had a major impact. Before, Badr was still hidden, but now the major superpower in the Arab Peninsula was defeated by a group of people they called Muslims, and they follow an illiterate prophet, blessing upon him. Now it is basically giving strength to the dawah itself that yes, this is coming right, and they started to take into account. And basically through trading, people moved news all over the place. I think from that moment there was a major issue that the Jews never forgotten, which basically where they're going to be from that point on. Because as we all know, they expected the last prophet will come from Isaac's side, but he came from Ismail's side. So they never forgotten that. And they also realized that during Prophet Muhammad's stay or residence in Medina, this is not going to be going easy for them. After winning the Battle of Badr, they expected that Prophet Muhammad is going to start to expand in his army and spend more and more on training people. So it's really a defining moment in the history of Islam, particularly Badr. And from that, I think the confidence in themselves, and the confidence in the faith, and the confidence in Islam, and the confidence in God's victory, as the brother said, during the fasting and struggle, etc. I think that was really a major issue. So the impact here, we still touch it, we still feel it, because after 1500 years almost, we still hear about Badr. So this is how big that impact of the war was.
Okay, so you seem to want to earlier mention from the Battle of Badr up until currently. So there seems to be drawn a comparison between the Battle of Badr.
Yes, there is. There's a number of studies that we did. The last war between the Arabs and the Jews, basically, if you look at the circumstances where the Badr really took place, and the victimization and the marginalizations of the Muslims at the time, and taking them out and displacing them. I think a lot of that was seen during since the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, and displacing a lot of Arabs and Muslims in that particular area, attacking basically the Arab territories in 1967 and acquired some of it, including the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula. And we seen during 1967 and 73 basically a lot of preparation that took place exactly as Prophet Muhammad prepared it for Badr, because he knew they had to go through a war to put that defining point. And even the operation in October War 1973, or as the Jewish call it, Yom Kippur, it's actually called the Badr Battle. That the 6th of October 1973 is actually called Badr Battle. Or Badr operations. So the defining moment here again was that the Arabs lost a lot of their lands, or Muslims generally lost a lot of their lands. The birth of the Jewish state in the Middle East became basically intolerable. The occupation of Palestine, talking about almost 70% of it now. So 1973 war was a defining moment again in the history of Islam, that people started to give up. What is happening to the Muslim nation? What is happening to 500 million Muslims in the Middle East? Why are the Jewish state overtaking that politically, economically, and even on a war fair front? So 1973 has enabled the Arabs, not all of them basically, to regain or restore a lot of their rights. Very similar. And we're still going to see, that's my expectation, is not end yet. This is a battle, it's not a war. So my expectation is that there's a lot of battles we will see in the Middle East until Islam is restored in its right image. And for us to do that, we've got to basically have that right faith again, prepare ourselves internally so we can externally be a powerful nation. Because the power, as Mr. Ahmed said, it's internally. It's an internal belief and faith that basically comes out and makes us a strong and a powerful nation.
Okay, so we talked about earlier today before the show, we talked about some of the causes of you know, quote unquote wars currently.
Yeah.
And if the causation of the wars is the condition of the Muslims itself, is not solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you enter in the middle of it, and somewhere in the middle you said we're going to change the idea of it and say that we're going to do it for the sake of Islam, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So it seems as though within the Badr there was one ideology, there was one people, and it was about Muslims, not a nation state or anything like this.
Yeah.
So this is the reason why Ramadan enabled them to just progress forward. But even with or without Ramadan, they had that sole belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this was it. So now within particular different nations, now if this is not the sole reality, if we're talking about anything other than politics, nationalism, economical game, anything other than for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can the comparison be made, inshallah?
Yeah, the fact here is, goes back to what I said right in the beginning, is how strong our belief is. So we can fight a war, you and I, right now, but you're going to be fighting for the sake of God, I'm going to be fighting for the sake of a land. So the difference between you and me here is in the level of faith, is how strong you and I are believing it. So any defense for the land, for our women, for children, for rights, for education, is fighting for Islam. Because basically the fighting for the sake of God can be translated in a number of areas, but all of it has to, or have to lead to, in the end, to be for the sake of God. So irrespective of whether the naming of it might be different, but your intention is, that's in the end. If my intention is only a land and that's about it and I forget Islam, yes, I agree with you, then it's wrong. But if I am defending something and in the end, in the sake of God, for the sake of God, then it is definitely, otherwise Prophet wouldn't say that defend your land, defend your women, defend your dignity. All of it are aspects of our nation and part of our religion.
Okay, we're going to pause for a short break, inshallah ta'ala. Dear viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers, to another live episode of Gates of Goodness. I'm your host, Yusuf Korma, and today we're covering the Battle of Badr and the significance of Ramadan on that battle and the impact that Ramadan had, and how can we use the lessons from the Sahaba in order to increase our religion, increase our nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before we left, we talked about the setting of the Battle of Badr, the circumstances that led up to it, what was the economical impact, the social impact, the international impact Dr. Emaad mentioned. So now we're going to sort of discuss how we as an ummah currently today can take the lessons from that, from the spiritual lessons, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, that don't say that it was you that threw, rather it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that threw. That wholly our success lies in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what lessons can we take in the last 10 days of Ramadan from the spiritual components of the Badr and the Sahaba to sort of increase our iman and move forward in our worshipping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Well, I will start just simply, and the brothers definitely will have more knowledge on that. The issue of the strength of a nation, the strength of a country, always goes down to the strength of the individual himself, because he's the unit. And as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam always relied during his life on building the person, his belief, his courage, his faith, and from that you become strong, I become strong, every one of us becomes strong, so the nation becomes strong. So if you go back to the units of a nation, the units of a nation is a tribe. From that tribe there's families, and the families comprises individuals. So the unit that we need to strengthen, every one of us has a responsibility, every one of us is a shepherd, and if we all individually manage to strengthen ourselves, go back to the righteous principles of Islam, every individual of us will be strong, and believe me, only that time our nations will fear us. We don't want them to fear us, but we want to always ensure that we are not victimized, as we've seen all over the place, in Burma, in Palestine, everywhere. The Muslim nations are victimized, or individuals are victimized, and that's simply because the nation is weak. So if we want to strengthen the nation, we need to go back to the actual building blocks, and the building blocks are our families. So every individual need to go back and try to restore what we have inherited from Prophet Muhammad and Sahaba, to basically strengthen our faith and become nearer to God.
I absolutely agree. I'm going to get Brother Amr involved and Brother Idris.
Yeah, if we're talking about Badr, we have so many lessons. The Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, they gave us a lot of examples how to gain victory, even in the war battle or like otherwise. So the first thing, if we thinking about the Battle of Badr as like on the human matters, as we said before, 300 against more than 1,000 Meccans, and the idea of the option of losing this war is the end of Islam, because if you lose this, it's gone. Like it's in the beginning, it's still very we're not very a lot of yeah. And then if we go to this kind of war against Mecca and we lose, that's it. They're gonna wipe us out. So the Sahaba didn't think this way, and Prophet Muhammad didn't think this way. We're having this war, even if we're belittled or outnumbered, because we have trust in Allah. But this is not the idea. Like they didn't think about this and that's it, and they went to war. No, they prepared themselves as well as they can. They prepared themselves with weapons, with putting the plan. And Prophet ﷺ made a very good example of shura with his companions when they were choosing a place to camp. And then Prophet ﷺ chose a place, and then Salman al-Farisi came to him and said, "Is it the word of Allah or it's war?" And Prophet ﷺ said, "No, it's war," and putting a plan. So he said, "No, we should move to the place of the will of Badr, so we have control over the water resource." So now they took every possible preparation step they have or they could, and they were equipped with everything they had at this time. And then, like, this is the idea of tawakkul ala Allah. We take every possible reason or a way we have or is possible for us, and then we have trust in Allah that Allah will gain us victory. This is what happened in Badr. Prophet made shura with his companions how to put the game plan, the war plan, I'm sorry, and then they equipped themselves as well as they could, and then they went to war with the trust in Allah.
Brother Idris?
Yeah, for me, I could just echo some of the things he said and add a few things myself, basically like 6 things. The first thing is that they had, conviction in Allah. They had this undying knowing that, Allah is with them. They didn't have a wavering feeling. It wasn't like, maybe we shouldn't, no. They followed the Rasulullah ﷺ and they believed that this is the way it should be. This conviction is what a lot of people lack in today's society. They don't have this conviction. They don't really believe. I mean, any affliction that comes to them, they waver. Something comes over here, they have doubts. They're like feathers in the wind. They don't have, this conviction and straightforwardness and remaining steadfast. They don't really have it. We have to build upon that. This is what they had. This was one of the things that helped them with victory. The second thing is what he mentioned, tawakkul. They didn't think, okay, as I said, tawakkul isn't just to sit back and make dua and say, okay, Allah will take care of it. Because what will happen? They'll tell you that the days of manna and quail falling from the sky are over.
Sure.
You have to do your part. But tawakkul entails you doing everything you can possibly do, and then after you've done that, then you make your dua and you leave the rest to Allah. So this is what goes hand in hand with tawakkul. Tawakkul, sometimes people think that tawakkul is, I'll make dua and Allah will make it happen. He's not going to make it happen if you don't do anything. It doesn't work that way. You have to do your part. And the third thing is that we have to remember that the success is from Allah. It didn't come from the Sahaba. It didn't come from Rasulullah. It came from Allah. Now success is truly and solely from Allah. If He doesn't give you and grant you that what you need for success, you won't have it. And so you have to know this. If you don't know that, if you're thinking that you have a little bit of kibr that comes into you, or you have a little bit of pride, you've already failed. You have to know that success is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the fourth thing is that remember that when you're going through these trying and troubling hard things, is that you're not alone. Not only is success from Allah, Allah is with you. If you have these other things, Allah is with you. Don't feel like you're, you know, like I'm alone and I have to go through this and it's just me. Allah is with you. Believe in it in your heart, to the core of your heart. And another thing after this would be that you have unity. Badr showed unity. We had people who had differences in lifestyle, difference in wealth, difference in ideas of certain things. But when it came down to it at the end of the day, they all agreed to follow the Rasul as the leader, and they united and did what he asked to do for one purpose and one cause only. So this unity shows us the success. You know, it shows you the recipe for success. You can't take these ingredients and expect to get the same taste. Okay. It's like making a dish and taking out like garlic. It doesn't taste the same. You know, garlic gives it that, in most foods, that nice, lovely taste. It doesn't give you the same feeling. Same thing. This recipe for success needs to be followed. They laid down this foundation for us. And the last thing is never act like you're defeated. Never feel like, you know, you're deflated or whatever situation is coming. They learned that, you know what, no matter what the situation is, you have to have this certainty, you know, istiqamah. Remain firm and don't act like, you know, we're going to be destroyed and defeated. Don't act like that. Even after, suppose you did lose, don't ever act defeated. This isn't the mentality or the behavior of a Muslim is to act like he's defeated. You know, we talked about this before, having, even Rajab gave us the idea that whatever happens to you is from Allah. It's qadr Allah. And that, you know what, you have to be pleased with it or you have to be patient upon it, one of the two. Anything besides those two is not the behavior of a believer. So whatever happens, you have to be patient upon it and accept it. So don't ever act defeated. That's probably about the 6 things, the quick things, since we're running out of time, that I can remember and most beneficial that you can take from these battles, not just Badr, from a lot of the battles in Badr, you can take from Ramadan. You can take from these gems and apply them into your heart in today's world, and because not everybody is facing the same, you know, in the middle of jihad or anything like. Some of us are just living our lives in cities. You can take these gems and try to implement them and make the ummah and yourself a better person, inshallah.
Okay, so right there, Dr. Ahmad, you mentioned about building the individual, which ultimately leads to the building of civilizations. What are some, as you're a professor of political sciences and strategic studies, what are some strategic ways that we can economically build the Islamic Ummah, we can, on the educational level, develop our education, and just all around develop the Islamic Ummah so that we can feel it at a ground level and all the way at the top?
The Western societies, or the enemies of Islam, particularly in Western societies, and using the media as the most modern tool or a weapon, if you like. In the past, when you hate someone, you could kill him and get rid of it. But at this point, the most influential way to kill someone is frame him. And Islam is being framed in bad lights. And that takes us to the reputation of terrorism and things like that, which are not true. But because the enemies of Islam trying to frame it and frame the nation in such a way that are hated. So it goes back to us. And I remember in one of the sessions, a brother was in one of the countries, and he said that a teacher after September 11th asked one of the students to stand up and tell us about Islam. He was one of the Muslims among a number of non-Muslims kids. And the kid stood up and he said, well, we Muslims, we don't eat pork and we don't drink wine. And stopped. What else about Islam? The kid didn't add anything. So what we're trying to say here is that we lost the right path in educating our kids, in explaining to them what is religion. Islam is a way of life. I don't regard Islam as a ritual kind of a path. Islam is a way of life. Islam is in our behaviors, in the way we dress, in the way we eat, in the way we marry, in the way we divorce, in the way we walk. So it's a way of life. And unfortunately, if you go back to these actual you know, small things, you find that we are not following Islam. We don't dress the way Islam instructs us. We don't eat the same way. We don't marry or divorce the same way. We don't walk. We don't treat each other the same way. And that basically has a major impact in the framing of being bad nation. Because we as a Muslim nation, we're not following the right instructions and principles of Islam to stand out as examples. So the framing caused by the media of the enemies is actually caused by us because we prove it. So you find, for example, a beggar in a street that can't find food, and at the same time you find a man that is driving a car for $2 million.
Sure.
So now when they look at Islam saying, well, what Islam are you talking about? Well, what kind of a peaceful religion you're talking about if you've got two in the same street, one can't find food and the other one is driving a car for $2 million. So the fact here is we need to go back to the basics and regard Islam as a way of life. The moment we changed our perspective on Islam that it is a religion, just a religion, being a ritual path, that's where we started losing. So we focused on praying, fasting, pilgrimage, zakah, and the shahada. That's all we're doing. But we go to the mosque, we come out, we make everything that the West don't even make. I mean, you walk in the street, you find that people in a Muslim society, and here we're not criticizing the community, but we're just saying that we have to stand as an example. If we, for example, pass in the street and we find a woman dressing in that half naked, now when they look at the Muslim society saying, well, where are instructions of Islam if that woman is walking that way? So the fact here is we have to be example, and that will have a major impact on a political sphere. So here I'm going back to a question, is that the fact here is politics is not about what you prepare in a House of Representatives or a Congress. Politics is about community. When you find corruption, I mean, some of the Arab countries, and don't want to mention names, are classified on the top 15 corrupted countries in the world. Where is this coming from? So when we try to talk about Islam on an international sphere, saying, what Islam are you talking about? You corrupt nation, you've got 42% poverty rate, you've got 40% illiteracy rate. So we're talking about Muslims that can't read and write in the 21st century. It's a disaster. So the fact here is we need to go back to the basics. Do not separate or split Islam from being a religion of rituals and a religion that is a constitution for life. So the fact here is that's what we're missing, and if we can fix that through our educating our kids and training them, we're going to be strong individuals, and strong families, and strong nations, and that will help us on economic, socio-cultural, and political.
Alhamdulillah. I wish we can just pack that answer up and just write a textbook about it, inshallah. And in the beginning, Doctor, I was even apprehensive to romanticize the idea of Badr. Oh, this is what the Muslims did 1,400 years ago. And sort of completely forget about the actual problems, and you immediately addressed it. I wish that we had talked about those things from the beginning to end of the show. But
inshallah, in more episodes. But it's always the less or the smaller the message, the better it is, because everybody knows. Everybody knows what's right and wrong, but we only remind people. That's all.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Dear viewers, it's reached that sad point of the night again where we have to end our episode. It's been an amazing discussion. We hope that you all have benefited. I would like to begin by thanking you and thanking our noble guest, Dr. Emaad, for a blessing with his presence and his knowledge. Brother Amr and Brother Idris, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome your month we all adore. We pray for happiness and more. To all the people, open up your door. Peace, love and joy. Let them soar, let them soar. Ramadan, Ramadan.